Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Our guest this week is Congressman David Cicilline. Congressman, on the first half I was asking you about Gordon Fox and the stunning raids at his home and State House office, and you said you tried to reach out to him. You got his husband Marcus on the phone. What do you make of you not being able to get in touch with Gordon?
I don't make anything.
You weren't offended by that in any way?
Look, I think it's obvious he's going through a very difficult time. I don't take any affront to it.
I want to talk about the political fallout of that, and Nick Mattiello is the new House Speaker. What's your relationship with him like?
Oh, I've known Nick for a long time. I knew him as a lawyer, so I have a good relationship with him, good relationship with Representative DeSimone. I'm lucky I have a good relationship with most of the members of the General Assembly.
DeSimone is the House Majority Leader
Yes.
now. So he made a Republican state rep, Doreen Costa, vice chair of the House Judiciary Committee. She said Mattiello is not, quote, a progressive Democrat. You are.
I'm a progressive Democrat. A proud progressive Democrat.
And I believe you're the vice chair of the Progressive Democratic Caucus in Washington, D.C. Are you disappointed at all in the... Would you like to have seen someone who is perceived more progressive, like Mike Marcello, in that seat?
No,
Are you concerned at all about Nick Mattiello?
No, I mean, look, I think what matters now is that the members of the House work together to confront the urgent issues facing our state. I look forward to working with the new Speaker, the Majority Leader, and being helpful in any way that I can. We do as a delegation. And, you know, there are going to be policy differences that I have with them, but they, you know, they'll enact what they think is right for Rhode Island. I'll fight for the things that I think matter to Rhode Island and Washington. But I think the one thing that everyone agrees on is the number one priority is what can we do to get Rhode Islanders back to work. We have the highest unemployment rate, or second highest in the country, depending on the month. Thousands of Rhode Islanders.
Do you think all of this is going to hurt the chances for that? I mean, are you worried about Rhode Island's perception in the wake of this? And do your colleagues down in D.C. go, Congressman, what is going on up there?
I don't think there's any question that, you know, we're competing with not only the region, but we're competing with the country in terms of investment, new business, the growth of business here in our own state, and anything that impedes that is not helpful to us. So I think, you know, we always have to be concerned in situations like this. It gives us the responsibility to redouble our efforts and really work together in a really collaborative way with the local, state, and federal governments to do everything we can to get people back to work, to revive our economy. And I think, you know, the interesting thing is on that issue, there's not a lot of partisanship, conservative, liberal, progressive, I mean, Democrat, Republican. I think there's a lot of kind of unified thing about what we need to do to get Rhode Island back to work and to get our economy moving again.
Let's talk a little bit more about politics. Boy, this campaign cycle for you is very different than it was 2 years ago. But you do have a challenger. I think just this week, a young Matt Fecto, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, announced that he's going to be a Democratic challenger to you. Do you know anything about him? Have you talked to him? And are you expecting, what are you hearing about any other potential challenges?
I have not spoken to him. I don't really know that much about him. I know he's announced his intention to run, and we're going to have a wonderfully long time to campaign, I'm sure. And my focus right now has been on the work that I'm doing in Washington and the responsibilities I have to my constituents here. We'll have lots of time to talk about campaigns and candidates and comparisons.
Did the two-year terms make you feel like you're campaigning all the time?
You are. I'll tell you, if it weren't for the fact that you have to raise money for re-election, I actually think the two-year campaign thing is okay. Because what
the two-year term.
Two-year term, because what it does is it forces you to kind of think about what have I worked on for the last 2 years, what do I want to work on and fight for the next 2 years. It requires you to share that information with your constituents who are your boss. It gives you an opportunity, obviously, to hear every day from constituents about what they care about. So I think there's a reason that we have these 2-year terms. And as I said, if it weren't for the fact that you had to raise money and all of the things that go with campaign finance, the idea of going to the voters every 2 years and being held accountable and arguing to them why you want to be reelected and why you believe you're doing the right thing for them, I think that's actually a reason for that.
So you're saying senators at 6 years terms aren't being held accountable?
No, they are accountable. You know, they're in a different category. When you're
so what are you hearing? Will Hillary Clinton run in 2016?
I don't think she's decided. I think every time she has asked about it, she's made it clear that she's undecided. I think
you're a supporter.
I'm a supporter. I think, you know, if she runs, she will win. I think she's an incredibly talented,
bold
great
statement
leader.
there, Congressman.
No, I do. I think if she runs, she wins. And my guess is, and I don't know this, but my guess is what's weighing on her is that she recognizes that if she runs and wins, which I think she would obviously make history, and that she probably thinks that if she doesn't, when is the next time, you know, in our lifetime that there will be a woman that gets elected president. I think she understands the enormity of what that would mean for women and girls and the kind of barrier that it would break, and that's important. And I think that weighs on her a lot, if I were to guess. But I know she's going to think carefully about it and do what's right for her and for our country, and I hope that means she runs for president.
How about in this state? Who do you like for the governor of Rhode Island, and do you plan on endorsing anyone before the primary?
I like the Democratic candidates. You know, I'm going to see how the primary unfolds and obviously be an enthusiastic supporter of the Democratic nominee.
So that is a no to endorsing anyone before the primary.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about foreign policy. You're a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You know, just from that front row seat, what is your view of the tense situation unfolding in Ukraine?
It's a very dangerous situation. I think that the president is proceeding in the right way. Look, this action by Putin is a violation of international law. It's a violation of existing treaty obligations. It's a violation of norms of international behavior. And what I thought was interesting is everyone said from the beginning, military options are, you know, obviously not a consideration. Sort of immediately, everyone sort of acknowledged that, which is quite a change from where we were in this country some years ago. And I think that's the right position. We have huge challenges in our own country to address. But I think what the president is trying to do is fashion a set of responses that will strengthen the country of Ukraine and impose a penalty on Putin and Russia for his behavior. Sanctions against his inner circle, people responsible for this, aid.
Your committee already addressed that, correct?
Yes, we passed a sanctions bill condemning the action of President Putin, a bill supporting the country of Ukraine. Then we passed loan guarantees that will be done through the IMF, International Monetary Fund, to help strengthen the Ukraine. You'll be happy to hear this, some investments in media so that communications can be made to people in Crimea about what the West is doing. The UN yesterday did at the General Assembly a resolution, I think about 100 votes condemning the action. So I think beginning to isolate Putin and impose sanctions so that his inner circle feels the pain of his aggressive behavior. But this is a complicated issue because, you know, we have just been through the Iraq and Iran wars, Iraq and Afghanistan wars. We've lost thousands of American heroes, spent billions and billions of US dollars. The idea of engaging in another military conflict is unacceptable to everyone, I think. We have huge challenges in our own country.
You don't see a military scenario playing out?
I don't, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, I think it's the right position, but it's also a position that President Putin knows. And so he used this moment knowing that the entire West, particularly the U.S., was weary. And that doesn't mean we should prove him wrong and engage in a military conflict, but it is the circumstances in which we find ourselves. We have to be smart about the way we use our diplomatic and economic power to, you know, influence world events in the way the president has outlined.
Let's talk about the NSA in response to their surveillance scandal. The government is making plans to possibly move internet protocols or IP addresses overseas to some yet unnamed body. Former President Clinton is raising some red flags, and he's saying, quote, a lot of these so-called multi-stakeholders are really governments that want to gag people and restrict access to the internet. Where are you on this? Should we, in essence, be shipping our internet overseas?
I think we have to be very cautious about that kind of a proposal. This is a complicated issue because we want to do two things. We want to be sure that the internet remains available and accessible, and we don't place limitations on people's use and access to it. It's one of the great engines of our economy, and I think for the 21st century that will continue to be the case. And on the other hand, we obviously want to be sure that we are protecting the ability of our security agencies and our defense agencies to protect the American people. I think we can do both things, but I think the notion of sending those sites overseas raises lots of concerns about oversight and about our ability to ensure that they submit to the rules and regulations that exist in this country.
And is there a constitutional concern? I mean, we have First Amendment rights here that might play a role here if the IP addresses remain in the United States. You know, there will be a question about whether it applies if they're overseas.
That's exactly right.
Okay. The president announced he's ending the bulk phone collection program. There are still a lot of questions and hearings about the NSA, the digital data that they were scooping up. Where are you in intelligence gathering? And if you support the president on the phones, does he go far enough?
Well, actually, the president created a commission to make a set of recommendations. And interestingly, I met with one of the members of that commission, and it started off very divided. By the time the commission ended, every single one of their recommendations was unanimous. The president has articulated his intention to propose some or most even of those recommendations, but not all of them. I actually think all those recommendations make sense. I think the NSA collection is very, very disturbing. It is so broad and so intrusive. And
you know, that's interesting. We had Senator Whitehouse on, and he was a little more defensive. Now, this was a year ago, but he was a little more defensive of that program from his perspective.
I think we've seen very little evidence that the results of that collection have actually resulted in the disruption of a terrorist action or planned terrorist action. And it's a very, I don't think anyone contemplated when they passed the original legislation that it would involve the collection of every single phone call made in the United States, et cetera. So I think it needs to be reformed quickly, and it needs to be reformed in the right way, and that we have to worry about both issues: the security of the safety of the American people from a terrorist attack, but also our personal security, our ability to keep our matters private, that is enshrined in the Fourth Amendment, and is a part of American culture. This sort of idea that government has limits on what it can collect. I think that we have to do both things, and we can do both things, but we need to enact many of those reforms quickly. And the bulk data is one. I mean, moving that out of the hands of the government's one way to do it. But I think we also have to make sure that there's a judicial review of requests for information, and that there's a court or the FISA court or a regular court that's reviewing this, as opposed to just members of the intelligence community.
We have 30 seconds left. Do you realistically think that immigration is going to come up for a vote this year?
Yes. I think there's going to be tremendous pressure. There's one person standing in the way, the Speaker of the House. We've started
sort of an important person there, Congressman.
We started a discharge petition that was going to create additional pressure. I think the demand is going to be like the Violence Against Women Act. You know, they said no to that, and then pressure from all over the country, from women and people who care about women.
You think you can draw a parallel between those two?
No, I think that in terms of the organization, that there's an organized effort to demand action on this all across the country, and it's going to happen.
All right, we're fresh out of time. Congressman David Cicilline, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
this week.
for having me.
If you missed it, any of the program, it's online, WPRI.com. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.